Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming along to Stuart Morick's talk. This is going to be most informative. Stuart is a regular visitor at the Conscious Living Expo, and he is a naturopath from the Pure Health and Wellness Clinic in Bassendean, so he's local to us. We're very fortunate in WA, and he does live blood analysis, which is a fabulous thing to avail oneself of for their overall wellbeing and health. Now, Stuart's going to talk on a great topic today, and it's on, does eating fat make you fat? So let's welcome Stuart to the stage and give him a warm round of applause. Thank you.
Welcome to this presentation on does eating fat make you fat? For those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Stuart Morick. I'm a naturopath, a registered member of the Australian Natural Therapists Association. I've been practicing for 9 years. I'm one of the practitioners at Pure Health and Wellness Clinic, where we have practitioners for naturopathy, homeopathy, hypnotherapy, aromatherapy, reflexology, and remedial massage. We use natural medicine and holistic bodywork techniques to help our clients live healthier, happier lives. Okay, so just a little disclaimer then from the start. No part of this presentation is actually meant to diagnose or treat any condition in any way. So you do need to go and see your own practitioner if that's the case. Right, so today you will learn 5 different things we're going to go through. The big fat lie, the history of the deception about fats and health, the structure of fats, how fats are metabolized, and triggers of inflammation. The whole thing started with Ancel Keys, the American physiologist that postulated the hypothesis that saturated fat increases cholesterol in our blood, which is the underlying cause of obesity and cardiovascular disease. We've been told what to eat and what our diets should look like for us to be healthy. This misinformation is the big fat lie. Many people have just followed blindly to their detriment, like lemmings over a cliff. His hypothesis was like an atom bomb going off for human health. This single idea of his has changed the course of human history. And just like now we know it's foolish to be doing what the people in this photograph are doing, we now know that it's also wrong that dietary fats increase cholesterol and that cholesterol causes obesity and cardiovascular disease. The people that tell you that eating saturated fat raises cholesterol, which in turn causes heart disease and obesity, works under an assumption, which is that when you eat saturated fat, it will be turned into cholesterol, which for some unknown reason just randomly accumulates in the lining of our arteries. Any thinking person will surely ask, why would cholesterol accumulate at specific points in the lining of the arteries? What is the reason for this? So if we just take a look here, I'll use my laser pointer. This is demonstrating what a good healthy artery looks like. When cholesterol builds up here under that inner lining of the artery, it then reduces the blood flow. This then can build up so much that the lining becomes weakened, and then we see here ruptures. When that ruptures and the cholesterol comes out into the artery, that causes what's known as a thrombus, which blocks the blood vein. That's an instantaneous process. So if that does block there and then burst, that's when you have all the trouble. But there's specific reasons why the cholesterol will build up. It's not because you've got cholesterol in your diet or because you're eating saturated fat. This idea of cholesterol just randomly accumulating out of the blue at points here and there in the arteries has well and truly been debunked. As you can see by this picture of the Time magazine here, I'm not quite sure how well you can see that, I'll just point that out. It says, "Eat butter, scientists labelled fat the enemy. Why they were wrong." That's what that actually says there. So plenty of science coming out saying that it was all wrong. Ancel Keys effectively cherry-picked his research data to fit what was essentially a preconceived hypothesis. Here's what he did. Looking at this particular picture, I'm following a cardiac research scientist called Alan Watson. He's authored an excellent research book in the subject called, and he's called the book Serial Killer. It was spelt C-E-R-E-A-L, as in grains. Serial Killer, the unintended consequences of the low-fat diet. So, just expanding on what Alan Watson has got written here, you can see Ansel Keys actually published this study. There were 22 countries in the study. He picked 6 or 7 of them, 6 in fact, and when you pick a certain 6, it makes this strong correlation that if you eat dietary fat, you're going to, so this is the level of dietary fat in the diet along the bottom, this is your chance of getting a heart attack along this axis. So if you eat more dietary fat, it's saying you've got a higher chance of getting a heart attack. But that's only if you use 6 countries. He looked at 22. So when you look at all 22 and you do a statistical average of what's occurring there, you see that this is the line you come up with, which says that if you eat a little bit of fat, you've got this chance of getting a heart attack. If you eat a whole lot of fat, well, you've hardly got any more chance of getting a heart attack. So that's the facts, but that is the cherry-picked data that was published. I might just actually read this out a little bit here for you. Selecting 6 countries according to margarine use is what he did. So if you correlate, this is actually a good correlation for margarine use. The more margarine you've got in your diet, the higher your chance of a heart attack. So margarine is not a saturated fat, does not have cholesterol in it. It's a polyunsaturated fat. Margarine, in fact, is a highly processed, industrial-made fat. So that's what this actually shows. When you look at what really big universities are saying, they can't even actually ignore the facts anymore. So I found something on Harvard University's website. They have a page on their School of Public Health site, and it covers what cholesterol, a little more truth. It's got a little bit of stuff in there that I don't entirely agree with. I've blown up this page so you can have a look at it. You see here, I'll just read this. I'll point that out for you. The biggest influence on blood cholesterol level, so this is directly from Harvard University's website, is a mix of fats and carbohydrates in your diet. Well, actually, the fats, they don't clarify. They're not clarifying whether it's an industrial-made fat or a natural fat, and it's definitely about the carbs in your diet. It's not the amount of cholesterol you eat from food. So that is saying it very clearly. Your blood cholesterol doesn't depend on the cholesterol in your food. It's really important, they say, if you've got diabetes, to limit the amount of cholesterol in your blood, only because that helps you not go into ketoacidosis if you're a diabetic. But for most people, dietary cholesterol is not as problematic as once believed. The body uses cholesterol as a starting point to make estrogen, testosterone, vitamin D and other vital compounds. Cholesterol in the bloodstream, specifically what's termed the medical sort of fraternity, basically terms it as LDL as bad cholesterol. I don't think it's bad at all, but they're saying here the bad cholesterol is what's most important in determining health risk. We have a very slow connection, sorry about that. There we go. So it all started in the 1950s when President Eisenhower was in his administration. He was a beloved president. He enjoyed a very high approval rating. He became the latest very high profile victim to fall to a heart attack. He was president from the 20th of January 1953 to the 20th of January 1961. So he led the US for 2 full terms. He was born in 1890 and he died in 1969, so only 8 years after finishing his second term as president. President Eisenhower's poor health and heart attack became the pivotal moment in this whole cholesterol story. Back in the 1930s and leading up to the 1950s, many cardiologists had never, in fact, some of them never even seen cases of cardiac arrest, never seen a heart attack. They could, in fact, back then practice for whole of their careers and not even see one heart attack patient. But through the 30s and up to the 50s, the rate of heart attack began to climb. This was the beginning of a new trend. And because of the way heart attacks were being publicised, and with the President's heart attack receiving massive publicity, people the world over began to become fearful of this new thing called a heart attack. The words heart attack had hardly ever been heard of by many people, by the public, but now everybody heard about it, and it was a killer, and it knew no boundaries. Basically, everybody was panicked by this, and isn't that just how the press works? They'll try to get fear marketing going because it brings them a great response to selling newspapers and advertising. But you need to know that the man who would become the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, that's Eisenhower there, with the troops on D-Day, he started smoking when he was a cadet at West Point, and by the time he was 59, just 4 years before becoming president, he was already smoking 4 packets a day. He was elected president in '52, and ironically, he was heard to remark on occasion how difficult and yet necessary it was to stay fit in such a demanding position as the President of the United States. The only physical activity that he ever really undertook was golfing, and he loved it. And it was during one of those games of golf that he experienced chest pain, which was, in those days, thought just to be indigestion. He was on vacation and was playing golf at the Cherry Hills Country Club outside of Denver, Colorado. This was September 1955. He was 64 years old. Eisenhower was apparently infamous for his fierce temper, and he hated being interrupted while playing golf. It was on this day that he had been repeatedly interrupted by Secretary of State John Dulles, and had to go back to the clubhouse yet again to take another phone call from Dulles, that one of his aides observed that he was so angry that the blood veins on his forehead stood out like whipcords. That was the comment made by the aide. So his stress was really high. That afternoon he complained of chest pain. His doctor was called in to assess the situation. Bear in mind that doctors at this point in history had hardly ever seen anything like this before. His doctor was Major General Howard Snyder, who came to the conclusion that it was just indigestion. But later on, early in the morning at 2 a.m, he was awake again. Eisenhower was awake again with severe chest pain, and his doctor was called in, and he still thought it was just digestive upset. Press releases were broadcast in the morning at 8 a.m, saying the reason the president had been seen by the doctor was because of strong digestive upset. At midday, more press releases were put out saying his digestive issues were not serious. But at 2 p.m, he was finally taken to the hospital and put on to an electrocardiograph because he was still complaining of strong chest pain. And it was then that he was finally diagnosed with an acute myocardial infarction, which is technical words for a heart attack. So it was soon after his heart attack that the US government set up the McGovern Commission, and the goal of it was to improve the health of Americans. Essentially what happened then is that big agribusiness in sugar and manufactured oils hijacked the situation by donating incredible sums of money into scientific organisations that were meant to be advising the government on how to stop the rising tide of heart attacks. The result is what I essentially call the unhealthy food pyramid that we have today, which really promotes large intake of carbohydrates, high manufactured polyunsaturated fats, and low saturated fat intake. So that's where we've come from, and that's why we have arrived at where we are today, because our government just automatically followed what the US government did, and so did a lot of other European governments as well. However, jump forward to 1990, and the mainstream scientific community has now successfully silenced all the researchers who were showing contrarian views with good research that eating fat did not make you fat and sick. Powerful corporations in grain, sugar, soy, corn, and manufactured unnatural oils and margarines now had full control of the scientific boards that were charged with the health of the nation. However, some doctors, like the preeminent cardiac surgeon Michael DeBakey, were very stoic in their opposition to the mainstream point of view. Nobody could dare contradict DeBakey. He designed the artificial heart valve, he designed the artificial heart, and he had a big hand in designing the machinery for open heart surgery. He is also the designer of the MASH hospital units, the Medical Surgical Hospital Mobile Army units. As head of university and national heart boards, he had a large federal funds backing him for cardiovascular research. And I was lucky enough to hear an interview by one of DeBakey's research team members from the 1990s. He said, because DeBakey's not with us at the moment, well, anymore, he died in about 2008 or 2009 at about 91 years old. One of these research team members said that DeBakey rarely ate lunch. So he was an automatic intermittent faster. But if he did eat lunch, he would eat a hunk of fatty cheese, something like brie or camembert. Colleagues of his who had bought into the low-fat hypothesis would attempt to address him, to which he would respond, "It's not about the cheese. The average cholesterol value of my cardiac patient is 188. So in our terms, that translates to 4. So if you've been to your doctor, they get up in arms and want to prescribe you a statin if you're at 5.5. But, sorry? Yeah, and damage your liver, that is correct. Yeah, they're hard on the liver. Yep, they're actually hard on your heart as well, because they reduce your CoQ10 and your heart needs CoQ10. But he said it can't be about eating fatty foods, because if you're at a 4, his average value of patients that he's doing open heart surgery on is 4. So it's definitely not about the cholesterol. But he, having said that, he got no airtime either. You know, he got no publicity for saying that. So Ansel Keys actually latched on to the research done by this man early in the century, Anichkov. Anichkov did some research where he took rabbits and injected cholesterol into them, because Anichkov originally found cholesterol in the fatty plaques in humans. So he took that, injected it into rabbits, and it caused fatty plaques in rabbits and gave them heart attacks. However, nobody told Anichkov that rabbits are vegan. There is no cholesterol in a vegan diet, so the only cholesterol they're ever going to get is pretty much 0, unless he maybe used Monty Python's carnivorous rabbits out of the Holy Grail. If he did something like that, then maybe he would have got a different result, but it's pretty ridiculous research, and that's what they used, and actually Ansel Keys sort of latched on to that as well. So that proves if you feed an unnatural diet, a non-natural rabbit diet to rabbits, they'll get health problems. And this is the whole issue with this unnatural, highly manufactured oils that we're told to eat. It's not part of a human natural diet. It's going to cause problems. So in researching this, I actually looked at a lot of stuff online and researchers who are doing a lot of good work. This researcher, Denise Minger, yeah, you can't actually see it there, but her little tagline underneath her headline is "Rescuing Good Health from Bad Science." What I found really interesting is that if you look here, she found that when she read his original paper, his original hypothesis, the relationship of the diet to the development of atherosclerosis in man, that was actually Ansel Keys' original paper. she says, well, Keyes says it really clearly in the paper what his views are. And this is it, quote, "The evidence, both from experiments and from field surveys, indicates that the cholesterol content per se of a natural," there's the key word, natural diets, has no significant effect on either the serum cholesterol or the development of atherosclerosis in humans. So atherosclerosis is any heart disease. So he said it himself. Yet, you can see what happens once something gets hijacked by big business. That is not the message you hear. The message that you hear is Ansel Keys said, if you eat fat, you're going to get fat and die. But that's actually not what he said at all. There it is in writing. So she dug that up. A lot of her stuff is interesting to read if you want to go and look online at Denise Minger. So let's just take a look at fats and what they're made up of. So we'll take a quick look at olive oil here. Get my laser working again. So olive oil is 70% oleic acid. It is a monounsaturated fatty acid. So this is what makes up the substance that we know as olive oil. It's made up of all these different fatty acids, 6 of them. Most of it is this monounsaturated fatty acid called oleic acid. That chemically is a chemical depiction of an unsaturated bond. So a hydrogen or an oxygen can bind to that point. Then you've got linoleic acid, which is an omega-3. Then you've got linolenic acid, which is an omega-3. Linoleic acid, which is an omega-6. Then you've got saturated fat, no double bonds there. So no place where hydrogen or oxygen can react. Then you've got palmitoleic acid, which is also a monounsaturated oil. So predominantly it's a monounsaturated oil with a little bit of omega-3, omega-6 and a little bit of saturated oil in it as well. From a chemical standpoint, saturated fats are simply fat molecules that have no double bonds between carbon molecules because they're saturated with hydrogen already. Saturated fats are usually solid at room temperature for that reason. They're non-reactive, they're very stable. So taking a look at coconut oil, which is getting a bit of a bad rap in the press at the minute. It is made up mostly, as you can see here, of, of saturated fat. In percentage terms, most of it, 48% of it, is this fatty acid, lauric acid, and 48%, and it's basically mostly saturated fat, which is why it's solid at room temperature. Very little of it is unsaturated, and even then it's only a monounsaturated, not a polyunsaturated oil. So really it's actually very healthy for you. It carries, of course, no cholesterol because it's a plant. You can only get cholesterol out of something like lard from beef, lamb, pork, out of eggs, butter. Only that will have some cholesterol in it. So very healthy oil. Canola oil. Looking at that picture there, you can see that the canola seed is a small black seed, which I'm told yields a very dark black oil once it's cracked. It takes a very high temperature process to crack it, to get it out, and it's a black oil. So my opinion of canola oil is the best place for it is in the sump of your car. A lot of the oils, high-tech oils these days that are used in high-performance engines is in fact canola oil, not mineral oil from the ground. That high temperature process is what makes it so damaging to the body. It is an oil that damages the body. So I just want to go through this side again, looking at some really good work from Alan Watson. Alan Watson is a bit like our Peter Dingle. He is an avid researcher. He produces really good stuff, and if you want to follow him online or on Twitter, really recommend it. But have a look at this. This is actually how margarine is manufactured. So we start with soy, corn or cottonseed oil or canola. Oils are extracted by high temperature and pressure, then the remaining fraction of oil is removed with hexane and other solvents. The oils, which are now rancid, are steam cleaned to remove all the vitamins and antioxidants, but pesticides and solvents actually still remain. The oils are mixed with a nickel catalyst. The oils with the catalyst are subjected to hydrogen gas in a high pressure, high temperature reactor. That's the hydrogenation of the oil. This process right here is what makes trans fatty acids, the ones that are really inflammatory and damaging to the lining of your arteries. The government has said the oil manufacturers have to remove the trans fatty acids now out of their product. So, but the high pressure and high temperature damaged oils are still inflammatory to your lining of your blood vessels. Then they use a soap-like emulsifier is mixed in. Then the oil is steam cleaned again to remove the horrible odour. Then the grey colour is removed by bleaching, so it's bleached. Artificial flavours, synthetic vitamins and natural colour is added. The mixture is then packaged in blocks or tubs, and hooray! Advertising promotes margarine as a health food. There you have it. Not in my house. Yeah. The spray.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still organic, but it's not the biodynamic and all that.
Yeah.
But the spray so often.
Yeah.
It's
I have to. Yeah.
and that's how
You're getting all of that coming through if you eat that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it does destroy your gut, and it's inflammatory in the body. That's actually the cause of cardiovascular disease. Or stress is too. Stress, that's why I brought up that point about Eisenhower, because that guy was stressed and everyone saw it, and then he has a heart attack. So, and he smoked. Smoking is damaging to the lining of the blood vessels as well. So, and he was getting on the bandwagon of eating more margarine, because margarine was coming into the diets of the 6 countries in the cherry-picked data of Ansel Keys. Those 6 country studies, that was mostly margarine use correlation. So, yeah, sorry, I'll keep going because we're going to run out of time. Rapeseed is really the true name of canola. Canola is just an acronym to try to sell the oil a little bit better. But the interesting thing you have to know about rapeseed or canola is that the history of it is that canola was always farmed, or rapeseed in fact actually was always farmed for the oil as an industrial oil. Rapeseed oil is one of the few oils that will stick to a wet surface. So it was used for ships. All the lubricants on the inside, outside, engines, etc. of ships. World War II made canola oil explode. So then after World War II, all these canola growers had become fat, rich and powerful from all their sales to all of the naval ships. And then they decided, well, what do we do with all our production? What they did is they found a low erucic acid version of one of the rapeseed strains, and they started promoting the low erucic acid version of rapeseed, and they made it into an acronym, Canadian Oil Low Erucic Acid. So that's actually, erucic acid is highly, highly toxic to humans and to animals. It causes a lot of inflammation. Erucic acid is still present in modern canola oil, but in lower quantities. However, if you, of course, continually consume just a low volume, but continually consume a toxin, it will eventually do something to you. And so say the European Food Safety Authority. Right there on their website, they're saying if you consume high amounts of foods containing that substance, the erythric acid, it can present a real health risk. So, the moral of the story is that there are fats that are fit for human consumption, and that there are those that are not. Now, I dived right back into... thank you. So I dived back into my textbooks as a naturopath, and I looked at this book. This is an awesome book. This one, Advanced Nutrition and Human Metabolism, explains pretty clearly how the body actually works and what happens when you eat fats. So we don't change. We might change over millions of years maybe, if you're into the theory of evolution, but over the last 50 and 100 years, we haven't changed a bit. So what we're going to see from this is directly taken out of the Human Metabolism textbook, and I will have to run through it with you. What we've got depicted here is right in the middle, we have, this is a liver cell. It's called an hepatocyte. So this here is depicting what happens in the liver cell, because right here we have the vein that comes into the liver, which is called the portal vein, and here we have the hepatic vein, which is the vein that goes out of the liver. So coming into the liver, we see what comes in from the intestine, our dietary nutrients, which is glucose, amino acids, and free fatty acids. Fat just can't go into your blood. Fat's not water soluble. It has to be bound to something to get into your blood, and this is bound to albumin. So albumin-bound free fatty acids and chylomicron remnants. So chylomicrons are fats encased in protein. But if you look what happens, glucose comes in here and goes down a metabolic pathway and either becomes glycogen or it goes off and becomes converted. So glucose, carbohydrates, sugar, gets converted into fat in your liver cell. Or it may go down here and take another pathway where it goes into something called the Krebs cycle, which is the energy cycle in our cells that produces energy. So glucose will come down here and get burnt for energy, but if it doesn't, it gets shunted back over here to become a fat. Free fatty acids go straight through to become fat. However, here, these chylomicron remnants are your cholesterol that's coming in from your diet. So if you're eating cheese, meat, etc., eggs, that comes through here, comes down this pathway first. This is the dominant pathway, cholesterol. Look what happens. It gets spat straight out with biliary excretion. 60% of the cholesterol that you eat is sent straight out with your stools. Goes straight out through your intestine. The other 40% is used up here to make something called VLDL, which actually means very low density lipoprotein, so very low density cholesterol, and what gets termed the good cholesterol, HDL, high density lipoprotein. They're the only two forms of cholesterol that go into your blood, that go into circulation. So where is this LDL? So if you ever showed that to a doctor and said, they're saying your LDL's going high, how? How? There is no mechanism to make the liver make LDL go straight into the blood. Does not happen. There's no way it can be done. So what actually does happen? This is what happens. So looking at circulation in a blood vessel, we have the VLDL, like I just showed, along with the good cholesterol, the HDL, in the bloodstream. But here in the bloodstream, an enzyme converts the very low density lipoprotein into the bad cholesterol, the LDL. And I don't actually call it bad cholesterol, I'm just calling it that because that's what you'll hear from your doctor. That is converted by an enzyme called LPL, lipoprotein lipase. I'm just going to call it a lipase because that's an enzyme that breaks down fat. Lipase breaks down fat, so it breaks down the VLDL in the bloodstream to LDL. But what you need to know about that pathway is there's something that triggers it, and it's insulin. If you have high insulin in your blood, that is a very active pathway. You'll get VLDL disappearing and turning into lots of the bad cholesterol. So what makes insulin go high? Sugar. Carbohydrates. Yep, if you eat too many sugar and carbohydrates, you're going to get lots of LDL. That's how you get LDL. It doesn't actually happen from eating cholesterol or from eating any type of fat, saturated or otherwise. This is active due to eating carbohydrates. The other thing is, this is actually a fat cell that we're looking at here, an adipocyte. In the adipocytes, the glucose goes out of the blood, gets whacked straight through to fat. If it's not burnt in the energy cycle, and it won't be burnt if you're too sedentary, the only thing that activates that is activity, is physical activity. You'll burn your glucose and stop it becoming fat inside your fat cell if you're active. But if you're not, blob straight down through there.
My brother's a top scientist, and I work for the scientific company, and with the electric office.
Yep.
And he came in after fasting overnight to go on these machines.
Oh, fasting, yeah.
And they proved after 2 days of cycling, hundreds and hundreds of Ks, all these top scientists were tested.
Yep.
And they still had too much glucose in the system, and they just had curry and rice, a bit of fruit.
High carb diet.
Well, curry and rice, but they rode probably 1,000 Ks over the weekend.
Wow.
And on Monday morning after fasting, during their fast,
Yep.
and they rode those 1,000 Ks, these guys were lean.
Yep. They still had what high in their blood?
Huge level of sugar, insulin,
You mean insulin or do you mean sugar?
they had too much sugar in there.
Still had too much sugar in their blood. So the body's still not using it.
Guys ride every day.
Yeah. So in those cases, what can often happen is the body breaks down muscle, which is why they're so lean, because it wants more protein rather than carb. Yeah. And it actually, in those sorts of things, the body wants more fat. But the insulin, like I said, insulin accelerates this pathway and makes you get more LDL. But the crazy thing is, if you have too much insulin in your blood from eating too much carbs, it shuts down the breakdown. There is another pathway here they haven't drawn that is activated by the same enzyme, the lipase, from here into the Krebs cycle. So fat can be broken down into other triglycerides, ketones in fact. That's what the ketogenic diet does. Breaks the fat down here and burns it in the energy producing cycle there. But high insulin will block it. You don't break down your fat if you have high insulin. And high insulin's a bit of a subjective term. If you've got insulin at a moderate level, really, you won't lose fat. You won't burn it. To lose fat, you've got to burn it, but insulin blocks it here, but here, insulin accelerates it. So, what's the result? You gain body fat and you gain bad cholesterol from high insulin, from too much carbohydrate. So that is actually real human metabolism. All right, I had a photo here of a live blood, but because I'm doing live blood analysis, and you can see the chylomicrons in the blood if you have it. So if you're interested in that, come down to our stand at stand 23. Just one other thing, this is how fats are metabolised. This is a massive scientific study called the PURE study. I'm just going to blow up their interpretation. They studied 135,000 people. And here's what they said. High carbohydrate intake was associated with higher risk of total mortality, whereas total fat and individual types of fat were related to lower total mortality, meaning death. Total fat and types of fat were not associated with cardiovascular disease, myocardial infarction, which is a heart attack, or cardiovascular disease mortality, whereas saturated fat had an inverse association with stroke. The more meat, cheese and butter you eat, the lower chance of a stroke. You've got a much lower chance of a stroke. Global dietary guidelines should be reconsidered in the light of these findings. Absolutely they should. Well, we need cholesterol. It's a great building block for all of these things: testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, DHEA and cholesterol. If you're stressed, your cortisol goes high, your liver will make more cholesterol, because it's saying we've got to make more cortisol. So we need more cholesterol. That's why stress makes your cholesterol go up. The brain is 60% cholesterol. It manufactures its own cholesterol. It doesn't come from the liver. But if you take a statin, it will shut down your cholesterol manufacturing process in your brain. So why does cholesterol go high? Well, it's carbohydrates and sugar and stress and smoking and inflammatory foods, an unnatural diet. That's what makes cholesterol go high. Just to reiterate, LDL cholesterol is actually like the ambulance. It goes out to repair damage. Inflammation makes damage to your artery linings. It goes out to repair it. If you keep eating things that make you inflamed and damaged linings, you will get more cholesterol going out. Your cholesterol will go up. The HDL cholesterol, the good cholesterol, is like the cleanup crew. That takes all the debris and damaged cholesterol back to the liver for excretion. Foods containing lectins must be well cooked. I'm 2 minutes over, I think, so I better stop. So if you eat these foods, and those foods, if you look at that, that is what makes up a lot of the healthy eating pyramid. Those foods, you shouldn't eat them, or eat them in low amounts because they increase your insulin and they've got lots of lectin. Just one tip, yeah? You want me to go back? Yep. So, what have we got there? Lots of bread, grains, tomato, unfortunately, but there's no lectins in the flesh. There is actually lectins in the seed and skin. And we'll just keep moving on. Refined white sugar is a very nasty effect on the immune system. It coats our white blood cells. The white blood cells can't see what they're doing. They're kind of blinded by being covered by a sugary coat, and then they do strange things like starting to attack you, causing inflammation. Then your cholesterol, your bad cholesterol, or the LDL, starts to go up. That's what we're told to do. You should just turn that on its head and do exactly the opposite. Essentially, we should be consuming fats and oils in generous quantities and not be scared of meat, butter and cheese. Do not be scared of the fats. Grain, cereal, bread, rice, pasta should all be consumed only in small quantities. So again, don't fear the fats. Have them as a regular part of your diet. Go ahead, enjoy the cream cheese, the cream as well, butter and meat. But as in all things, do it in moderation. That's the key. Or more importantly, in balance. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you. Stay balanced. Do we have time for...
Thank you so much, Stuart. Wasn't that a really informative talk, everyone? Thank you so much, Stuart.
Go down and get Peter Dingle's book on the cholesterol Lie, I think it's called, something like that. Get that, that's a good one. Yeah.
That was a myth-busting talk, wasn't
And
it?
yet your doctor will still keep banging that old drum. Of course it's to sell a drug. Excuse my cynicism.
Aren't we so grateful that we've listened to Stuart today?
Thank you very much.
Give Stuart a huge round of applause.